Hello and welcome to another episode of the ranking series, this time for the Fire Emblem main series soundtracks. Each one of these, I think, has the best soundtracks in the main series. And I'm using a different list, this time made by Cameron. Cameron right there. Specifically because it has different variants for the first, second, and third game. I thought it was very important for this list, at least, because again, I had never played those, to be able to talk about those soundtracks as well, because unlike having to play the game to rank it, which is why it went in the not played category or was wrapped in with the remakes, in this category, I can actually rate the soundtrack based on listening to it. And so I will be listening to the soundtrack for each game in between ranking the games. So you will not have a pause, but I will have a pause. However, I want to state my criteria here as I go through these. It's going to be hard not to be very subjective on this one. I try to be very objective when it comes to my rankings. But the main thing I'm looking for in these soundtracks is that they fit the theme of the game, that they fit what the game's going for. They need to fit the style of the game, and they need to invoke some kind of emotion. In my opinion, something like Shattered Hope from 7 or Against the Black Knight from 9 are like great examples of songs that fit that world so well and that really roll with the story and draw you in and are very memorable. And memorable is important here, in my opinion, as well. I think memorable music is going to be something that really catches your attention, something that sticks with you. And so that is another thing that I will be ranking them based on. But we're going to get started with the very first Fire Emblem. Okay, so Fire Emblem 1, the original Fire Emblem for the NES. I think these tracks are pretty good. I think the soundtrack does a pretty decent job. It definitely sets the trend for the entire series in a lot of ways. The Fire Emblem main theme is here in the credits, which is really solid. I actually think it's a really good version of that theme. But there is one track in particular that really stood out to me throughout the entire soundtrack, and that is Kingdom Seed, which is the, like, hey, it's chapter music, let's go. This is getting ready to go. And I think it's really solid. I think it really conveys the idea of, hey, let's play Fire Emblem. Of, hey, we have a big war ahead of us. We're going to win these small victories, but we need to be prepared for the rest. I think it's really good. I think it does a really good job setting the stage for what the game is. It's not very complicated, as many NES soundtracks were not, but I still love the way the NES sounds, and I think they did a really good job of what they had. So I'm going to put it in a solid B. I think it's a good soundtrack. Following that, we have Fire Emblem 2, Gaiden. Gaiden. Okay, having just listened to this soundtrack, there's some good tracks in there. There's some that didn't really resonate with me that well, and I do think that as a whole, soundtrack can be a little bit simplistic, but there are some really good tracks in here. I think To Sophia and Celica Setting Off are both really good tracks. With Mila's Divine Protection, of course, is a song that I already knew about, Echoes. And a lot of the soundtrack has been remixed really well in Echoes. We'll get there when we get there. But man, that final map soundtrack is so good and sounds so good in the older style. I really like it. I think I'm probably going to give it an A, honestly. I think it's really good. I do think, too, that FE2 has some of those memorable soundtracks that I'm looking for. Mila's Divine Protection and that final map theme, I know I've heard many times in various other videos that people have used, in memes. Those are songs that stick with you. And I'm not saying that Gaiden soundtrack is only good because I've heard the songs in memes, but those songs stick with people for a reason, right? I think those songs stand really well on their own, and really excited for when we get to the Echoes portion of this, because I remember the Echoes soundtrack being really solid. FE3! There's some good songs in here. I don't think this is a very powerful soundtrack. I don't think it really. There's a lot of brass in it. There's a lot of tracks in it, and some of them are really like. I really like Ricard. I really like Love Theme. I think they're pretty good, but it just doesn't work for me in a lot of ways. It just doesn't scream Fire Emblem to me. And I don't think that any of these tracks are really going to stick with me. None of them are really super memorable in that regard. I do think one big shout out I wanted to give is Legend of Dragon, the music box version, is really beautiful. And that's a really great song. I just wish there were more of the songs in this track for it being as big a soundtrack as it is that really stood out to me. And maybe having played that game, it would have meant more to me. Let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about this track. But I'm going to put FE3 soundtrack in an E, honestly. Um, it's fine, but it just does not work for me when it comes to Fire Emblem soundtracks. FE4, man. Like, I already talked about how much I love FE4 in the other video. FE4 has an amazing soundtrack. The Fire Emblem theme from FE4 is one of my favorites out of all the versions of the Fire Emblem theme. I think it's really solid. You have that prologue theme. It's so good. And then you get into like, that's just like the start. Dance in the Skies, Doors of Destiny, Beloved One. I'm listening to Beloved One right now, and I'm almost tearing up. That song is so good. Oh, man. And then you have like End of Despair. And I will say, because I do think a lot of these themes are really memorable. I don't think a lot of people know them by their names, right? Sadly, a lot of people still haven't played FE4. Genealogy, the Holy War is super worth being played. But I think if they heard them, if they heard the startup of like Glorious Granbell, they would know it right away. And for the praise that I gave FE3's soundtrack about the music box, there's a music box song literally called Music Box in the FE4 OST that is amazing. It's so good. Even if you never play FE4, you need to listen to the soundtrack of FE4. The ending ballad for the credits, oh, it's so good. I can't believe how good the soundtrack is for FE4. I'm just listening to it again right now. It's really solid. I'm going to play my hand and give it a triple S. It's an SSS tier. Because I absolutely think it is. I really do. I think that FE4, the number of songs that it has, how good they all are, how memorable they are, I think it fits every box that I wanted for my requirements. I think it fits the theme of the game really well. The music really sells you on the stuff that the characters are going through, you have these upbeat, happy tunes mixed in with these really depressing tunes in some ways. As the story starts off joyous words, and then slowly turns dark over the course of it. And I just think it's really good. It's a really good soundtrack. If you haven't listened to it yet, you should, because it's really solid. The only real complaint that I have is that it doesn't have a remake. Well, it's not a complaint. The only real complaint that I have is that because the maps are really big, you will hear some of those tracks on repeat forever. But they are, of course, intercut with a battle theme, which I think is really good. But that's not really a problem for me because I like the FE4 soundtrack so much. So, I think it's a triple S. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you don't like the FE4 soundtrack. I would love to know why, because I think it's really good. But let's move on to FE5. FE5, 3CS 776, a game that I still have not finished. This soundtracks are really good. The biggest issue that I have with it is that the tracks are named in the chapter, end of chapter, things like that, and then A or B, and that can be a bit confusing if you're looking for a specific song. However, I do think a lot of these tracks are really good. There is a voiced track in here, In the Wind, which I think is really solid. The Fire Emblem theme in 776 is really good as well. 3CS has a really good main Fire Emblem theme. And then you have just some really interesting songs. Not any that really like super reached out to me until Ballad plays in the ending. And Ballad is really, really solid. Followed up by Organ, which again, ending ballad and ending organ may not be the most um, well thought out names, but they are technically correct, even though organ is more of a music box than it is an organ. But either way, I think they're actually really solid themes. I think I'm going to put it after Echoes right now. It's definitely not as strong as FE4's, but it is still a really solid soundtrack, and I do like it quite a bit. FE6, Binding Blade. Although in a lot of ways, Binding Blade set the stage for Blazing Sword soundtrack, because they do share a lot of songs, even if Blazing Swords are a little bit more remixed from the Binding Blade versions. I do think Binding Blade soundtrack is pretty good. I think After the War is a really solid song. Melancholy's pretty good. Prepare to Charge is pretty nice. I think Battle for Whose Sake is really good. Binding Ties and Winning Road are both two really solid songs. However, my favorite is Beyond the Sky. It's not like it's not a crazy song when it comes to FE, like it's not super impactful or anyway, but it's just really upbeat. It just really catches your attention, you know, and it gets you excited to play Fire Emblem. And I think that's so important. Beyond the Sky is the theme that plays when you're on the map. Like it's just, you know, hey, let's go kill some enemies. Let's go win this war for Roy. And I think it's a really good song. And I'm not going to say that one song carries the entire soundtrack, because obviously it doesn't. There's a lot of really good songs in here. Land of Dragons is really good. Here's really good. I just think it's a really solid soundtrack. I don't know that it's like my favorite. I think it fits the theme really well. I would probably put it in an A tier as well. I might put it before FE5, before Thracia. But it's a really solid soundtrack. I like it a lot. I really like Beyond the Sky. FE7. All right. Listening to it back to back, it's so clear how many inspirations 7 gets from 6. Like, I knew they were in there, but I didn't realize how much they were in there. A lot of the songs from 7 are reused from 6. Now, the ones that aren't, Strike, Rise to the Challenge, Shattered Life Going into Anguish, One Heart, Elowood's theme, Loyalty, Hector's theme, Girl of the Plains, Lynn's theme. I think almost all those are really good. Strike is still to this day my favorite battle music in all of Fire Emblem. It's just da 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 da. It's so good, man. Yeah, it's a really good soundtrack. What tips it over for me is Shattered Life Going into Anguish, to the point where I cannot listen to those two songs separately anymore. They play so well together, and they're designed to go together, you know? I think it's a really, really strong soundtrack. Had it not been for the fact that it relies so much on the music of 6 and mixing the music of 6, and in some ways that's great because it's a prequel to 6, right? But had it had maybe a few more songs that were its own, then it might have gone a little bit higher, but I think I'm for sure going to put it in an A. I think it's really good. I really want to put it in an S. We're going to put it in an S, and we may move it back down, but I think it has a really, really good soundtrack. Sacred Stones has some good tracks in it, for sure. I think it's not the most memorable of the Fire Emblem tracks. I think that Rise Above, Battle Must Be Won, Leon's organ arrangement for his theme. Lost Heart's pretty good. Lights in the Dark is a pretty good world map theme. For the most part, 8 is just kind of there. Again, there's not much from it that I'm like thinking back to later on and going, you know, hey, yeah, this was great. For the most part, it's just, you know, hey, yeah, there were some good tracks in there. I think Leon's theme is really sad. And I think it does fit the theme of the game very well. I just don't think it's very memorable, which is unfortunate. I think it's not bad at all. I just think that when you look at the rest of this list, it just doesn't stand out quite as much. I think I'm going to put it in a B. Following that is FE9. Oh boy. Okay. So, FE9. I remembered this soundtrack being really good, but after just listening to it again? Oh boy. Okay. This is maybe my favorite Fire Emblem soundtrack. Like, it already was. And having re-listened to it again, I'm just as convinced as I was before. It's so solid, man. You have some great tracks. There's so many memorable tracks too, between Clash, Against the Dark Knight, Power Hungry Fool, Stratagem in Black Armor, With Us, Memory of Mom, Life Returns. This game is full of great soundtracks, and the throughout the game, it feels like it really fits the world. Power Hungry Fool is such a ridiculously good song that I would listen to it even outside of Fire Emblem. You know, I would listen to this song anywhere. It's just so good. But for it to be with Oliver, who is that Power Hungry Fool, for it to be with the character that most represents the idea of the selfishness of the Benyan nobles, you know? It fits so well. And then you have like goofy songs like Wonderful Pirates. I think this is just a really good soundtrack that balances out the idea of, you know, we have to have music that's, you know, lighthearted. We have to have music that's heavy. We have to have music that really tells the story of the characters that you're fighting against while you're fighting them in a really powerful way. And then, man, Memory of Mom. And when you find out that it's the same theme as the Heron song, and that, you know, it's a song that's important to Mist and to Elena and to Grail. Like, this game is just full of great music. I talked about how 8 Sacred Stones had some odd uses of brass. I think that 9 has some great uses of brass. I think they use them very well. And I think it's gotta go Triple S. It's too good not to, in my opinion. Like, even the tracks that are just like, oh, okay, like Rising Morale, it's still like, it's still a bop, you know? It's just a really good OST. There's so many memorable songs. It fits the theme so well. I can't not give it a Triple S. It's such a good soundtrack. However, going into Radiant Dawn, I don't remember the Radiant Dawn soundtrack. Let's find out what we got here. 10 has some really good tracks in it. Zelgius the Brave, Oliver's Fall, The Black Knight Lives, The Mind of Izuka, Zealous Prayer, Sorrowful Prince Peleus, Eyes of Rage, Battle Joined. There's some really good ones. My biggest issue with Radiant Dawn's soundtrack is that it's very bombastic, and a lot of the tracks are just boom, hey, here we are, you know, listen to me. And I think that works very well for the game. The game is very bombastic. The game is about, you know, all these different forces clashing. So it makes sense that the music is very cacophonous at times. But I do wish that it would slow down a little bit sometimes. I do wish that it was a bit more reserved in some songs. And there's not that many songs that aren't that way. Even the songs that are like the most in it, like Eternal Bond, Zelgius the Brave, take a second, and then they're just like, hey, here we go, here's the bombast, here's all the instruments, let's do it. And I do think the soundtrack's still really good. I just think that sometimes that's a bit much, and that I would have liked it if some more of the songs had slowed down a little bit. It does still have some really good, again, Sorrowful Prince Peleus is such a good song when it comes to like slowing it down and trying to tell a story. It really conveys just how torn Peleus is about everything that he's been tricked in. And I think it's a good soundtrack for sure. I just don't think it's my favorite. I'm gonna give it an A. It would have been higher if not for just how bombastic it is. Shadow Dragon, the remake for the DS, with heads held high. Clash of Two Virtues, come with us, return to us, friend, renewed purpose. This soundtrack is really solid, and it has some memorable soundtracks that are going to get pulled back for future games as well. Again, it is a remake of the first game. I do think they did a very good job on the DS cart with the actual soundtrack itself, with remixing these songs. And then there are new songs, and I just think it's a really, really good soundtrack. I think were it not for some of those songs that are reused later, it might not score as high. But things like with Heads Held High, oh, it's so good. And it comes back in Awakening. it's just a really good soundtrack. It's not quite as memorable as I would like it to be. So I think I'm probably going to put it at top of A, but it's still a really solid soundtrack. Before we move to New Mystery of the Emblem, I am going to go ahead and move Shadow Dragon up. I think it's a really good soundtrack. Um, New Mystery of the Emblem. Man, Tearing Shadows and Festival of Naga are really good. Like, there's some other great soundtracks on here too. Don't get me wrong. Whispers is really good. Those Who Approach is really solid. Forbidden Sanctuary is not bad at all. But man, it is crazy how good Tearing Shadows is, and how good Festival of Naga is. I think New Mystery Emblem absolutely has to be an A, and it's probably going to go right here. Actually, it's a really solid soundtrack. As much as I'm not a huge fan of Awakening itself, I do like the game. I just don't love the game. Um, this soundtrack's really solid. I think id, Purpose, and Don't Say Her Name might be two of my favorite soundtracks in all of Fire Emblem. They're really good. There's all those other versions of id. There's the great map theme, the great prep theme. My biggest issue with the Awakening soundtrack is how dumb the track names are for a lot of them. I mean, you have, like, id, Purpose, and Destiny, and Divine Decree, and then you have But Frederick, It's Nearly Dark, Og, One Goff in My Mouth, Black Fluey. Haha, yes, it will take some getting used to. Oh, it's not so bad, Lissa, just a healthy little walk. Like, why? Why did you name them like this? You did not have to do this. And it honestly makes it difficult sometimes to find the songs you want to find, because they have all these odd names to them. Like, for instance, I love the song Run All You Can, You Can't, or Run All You Like, You Can't Escape Fate. But, like, that could be like 3 words, and that would be good enough, Someone has to save you from your good intentions could just be good intentions. I don't know, it just feels really weird. And then, like, such bonds are the true strength of this army. Like, that's such a long name for a song when you could have just called it Bonds. But I do think it's a good soundtrack. I am going to put it in an S tier, even though I really dislike the names of the tracks. Just because I really like Don't Say Her Name. All of the id versions. I think they're super memorable. Ugh, but those names, man. It can't go in SSS, that's for sure. Now we move to Fates. This is where things get fun. So, Fates. Fates is really hard to score because all 3 games share a basic soundtrack and then have individual songs. So I think for the most part, I'm just going to score them all together and not really worry about trying to separate the 3. I do think it's got some really good music. I think Knowledge is really solid. I think End of All is really good. Coda is really good. As All Stars Fall, I have the list up here because I couldn't remember some of these names. Coming Demise, A Lady's Mirror is really good. I don't think they're super memorable other than one specific song. And that one specific song is like the most memorable. And it makes it really hard to judge where to put Fates, because You Are the Ocean's Gray Waves is such a, like, oh man, it's taken over Fire Emblem in a lot of ways, where people start talking about Fire Emblem and you'll just have that song playing in videos where people are talking about how much they love Fire Emblem, or you'll have that song remixes come up, and of course there's all the controversy about that song, about how the translation's not right, and it's supposed to be about how you are the ocean, you are an ocean of waves because you're making all the waves instead of being the ocean's gray waves, which doesn't super make a lot of sense. But regardless, I do think that song's pretty good, and I think a lot of the other tracks are really solid. It's just tough to rate them because of that. That one song is so memorable, and then the rest of them really aren't super memorable. But, like, Abundant Solace is a really good bass theme. I don't know, man. Let's go with a B. We're gonna say no. We'll go with an A. We'll go with an A. There's so many Fire Emblem tracks in A. I feel bad for 3. We're gonna move it up to D. Let's go to Echoes. So I had forgotten a lot about the Echo soundtrack. I had forgotten how good it is, honestly. There are so many good tracks in here. They've learned so much from Gaiden, and they've brought so much of Gaiden back into the soundtrack. Alm's route and Celica's route both have soundtracks that support them really well. That, you know, Alm's tracks are very warlike and are very, you know, bombastic, and they're really strong. But then it also has themes that slow down to really sell the villager theme of where he comes from. Whereas Celica has some tracks that are a bit more mournful, that lead into everything that happens with her and Mila Duma and everything there. You have all right, Green Street's back up. Cat knocked it down. We're good. Where was I? Yeah, it's just like the way that like Twilight of the Gods hits you. That's a track that I don't hear people talk about enough. It's so good. But then obviously with Mila's Divine Protection, talked about all the time. People love that song. The Chorus of Gods and Men is such a good song. The Voice That Calls You, I'm listening to it right now. It's so good. I think Echoes absolutely has one of the best soundtracks in the series. And I'm putting it in Triple S. I'm doing it. Echoes just has a really good soundtrack. Finally, we get to the newest one. Also, to clarify, I think it fits the story really well. It's super memorable. Really like it. We come to Three Houses. Three Houses. It's still really new. And I know there may be some recency bias here. I completely understand that. But it's a pretty solid soundtrack. I don't think it's perfect. I think there are a lot of tracks that are just kind of there. They're not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think there are some really good tracks too. I think that all of the final map themes, and there are different final map themes throughout, are really solid. And I like that, you know, we mentioned the Fates problem of 3 different games, all with very similar soundtracks, because they reuse a lot of them. Three Houses is one game, so all of the soundtracks count towards it. I think that each of the houses have a really, really good final map theme. With Claude's maybe being the best, I think that Dimitri's is really solid. And I do love the sad, sorrowful music. Unfortunately, a lot of the music is not currently available on YouTube, but you can listen to it all in the game, which is great. And I just think, like, The Dream Is Over, The King of Lions, The Leader's Path, even stuff like Scales of the Goddess and Gold Shattering Stars, we mentioned again, are like spiderwebs. You know, just, hey, it's a fun song, you know? And I think Three Houses is a really solid soundtrack. I think over time, it'll be very memorable. Edge of Dawn is already memed very hard, but I think Edge of Dawn is a really good song. I think in a lot of ways it'll probably replace Ocean's Grey Waves, but I think it's really good. I'm going to put it in an S tier. Over time, it may move up, but I'm pretty happy with this list. I want to go through the individual ranks. I think I am going to go ahead and bring Fire Emblem 3 up to a C. I still don't think it's a great soundtrack, but it's still doing its job, you know? I think this is perfect, just the way it is. I might do this, honestly. Despite the names, I might do this. And then here, this is still really good. We might do this. This is still really solid. I think this is still really good, and there we go. So let me know where you would put these Fire Emblem soundtracks in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been the Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum. The Fire Emblem to offer.